the reason that wordsmithing is so important, especially if you become a one-point preacher, is because you want to craft bottom lines that are not only biblically accurate, theologically faithful, but rhetorically compelling. What a combination that is. You're faithful to the Bible, you're accurate in your doctrine, and you are able to shape words and put them together in such a way that the hearer has to remember them. They are rhetorically compelling. And so I believe that the reason that wordsmithing is so important is because the way you use those words and the way you put them together in the right order with the right sort of techniques, which I'll get to in just a moment, have everything to do with their ability to implant themselves in the hearer's brain so that when that hearer is confronted later that week or even a month later with a life dilemma, with a situation, they can recall and call up that thing they heard in that sermon on that Sunday. They didn't hear 10 things. They heard one thing, and they heard it in a way that was biblically faithful, theologically accurate, and rhetorically compelling. So there are really a number of tools in your toolbox if you want to wordsmith well. And I use all of them at various times in a preaching calendar. The first one I would call syllable symmetry. It really works to craft a memorable sentence or two if the syllables, believe it or not, if the syllables match up. I had a message a number of years ago having to do with what we called the however kings in the history of Israel and Judah. And the refrain about the however kings was that they were good kings, however, they did not tear down the high places. Just one little problem they have. They let a little bit of idolatry remain in Israel. Well, when you see what happens to Israel and Judah, and they get overtaken, conquered by those very idol-worshiping countries and idol-worshiping religions they'd allowed to remain, the bottom line was kind of obvious. What you tolerate today will dominate you tomorrow. And if you notice, there's a syllable symmetry to the tolerate, dominate. There's contrast built today and tomorrow. There's a kind of compelling logic to it. What you tolerate today will dominate you tomorrow. And believe me, that bottom line has applications for individual lives, for what happens in a church, and for what happens in an entire denomination. What you tolerate today will dominate you tomorrow. Syllable symmetry. A second real tool of the trade of wordsmithing, I would call what you do with prepositions. Changing one slight word really has the ability to implant itself into the hearer's mind. And again, I think back to a message I did a number of years ago having to do with Elijah and the worst prayer ever prayed in the history of the Bible, where Elijah prays, "Lord, I'm going to sleep. I don't want to wake up. Take me." And instead, God doesn't answer that prayer. He wakes up and a messenger of the Lord appears to him and has breakfast for him. But twice the messenger of the Lord says, "Get up and eat." Not, "Here's breakfast in bed, Elijah, take it easy." Get up and eat. Own your own healing, Elijah. And from there, I was able to craft the bottom line. God won't do for you what he needs to do with you. God won't do for you what he needs to do with you. Just the for and the with change everything. And it really, I believe, allowed people to move away from kind of powerlessness, being enabled, to being empowered. God won't do for you what he needs to do with you. And then the third element in your toolbox, third tool in your toolbox, I would call contrast. If you can set up a bottom line that contrasts two realities That again has the ability to implant itself in your hearer's mind. I had a message having to do with Peter and his legacy that he left in people's lives, and the bottom line was, and it asked a question: what if your greatest legacy isn't something you accomplished, but someone you raised? Not something you accomplished, but someone you raise. So syllable symmetry and prepositions, one word making all the difference, and contrast. Those will be the best tools in your toolkit as you wordsmith your way to memorable, provocative sermons.